Talk a little bit about there's certain things with that relief that you have to do by statute, and there's guidelines that you have to follow. It's not just out of the goodness of your heart. Why don't you talk a little bit about what it's like to administer that program?
It's very a challenging program, and like you said, we run it by state statutes. The state statute tells us things that we can do. It does give us some leeway because they give us guidelines to go about. Each trustee, and there's 20 trustees in Allen County, and Wayne Township is the largest of any one of those 20s. But each township throughout the state, which is about 1,005 now, each one has their requirements that they must set up their eligibility or policy. A better word of saying policy. It's called standards of eligibility, but it is the policy, and the policy is recorded at the commissioner's office, and that's what we use to distinguish that we're being fair by treating everybody the same way. Given the guidelines that the state tells us that we must include in our statutes, then we have other things that we can do. Otherwise, we can adjust, for example, we can adjust the amount of assistance for rent according to each township. Some have been critical of that because they say everybody in the county should get the same thing. Well, housing in the Boyd Township is a lot more expensive than what it might be in Wayne Township or Adams Township or Monroe or Lafayette or Jefferson, et cetera, et cetera. So each township, that's why they say township is the government that's closest to the people. It's right at that level where the people know exactly, you know the people and the people know you, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. One of the things when I spoke with your opponent, Timothy Smith, one of the things that he mentioned was about efficiencies, and he felt that were areas that possibly you could be more efficient. Probably the biggest area that you spend the money outside of the actual relief is probably your personnel costs, and I would imagine that you're probably about as lean as you can be. What would you comment to?
Thank you, and I would just, I'm just smiling when you brought my opponent in there, and I don't think too much of a opponent. I don't live that time. I'm not saying negative, but I remember 4 years ago when I was the opponent, and I read and I studied and I studied and I studied, and so forth, and I was able to talk about the eligibility standards because I read the law. And even at that point in time, I wondered if the incumbent at that time knew as much as I did about that. So it surprised me that they didn't know very much about the efficiencies. Well, let me speak about the efficiencies. The Payee Program, which he played a part in, so forth. I'll tell you how we made it more efficient. Previously, the Payee Program would always have about 100 people that they help manage their utilities and their monies and pay the rents and so forth, so that they would not have to use township assistance. Well, they would give money out for any reason. Since we came in, we were more concerned. We wanted to make their lives more meaningful, so forth. So we suggested that each client have a savings and to create emergency fund for each one of them based upon what their income. We also went a step further, and we also helped them file for rental assistance from the Fort Wayne Housing Authority, food stamps. We also helped them to gain application for Community Action Northeast Indiana to help them with the utilities. And all these things brought about a better lifestyle for them and gave them more disposable income. And we tried to educate them to the things that they would be eligible for. That's one of the efficiencies that we did in that area. Another area, employment. Employment, we always said when we, 4 years ago, we believe that the best way out of poverty is a job, and the best way to stay out of poverty is long-range planning. Well, to that end, in I'm of the 19th century, 2008 and 2009, we were able to find better than 200 jobs as we divided the city up in quadrants and knocked on doors and asked employers to partner with us to help those people. And some of those jobs might be part-time, but you have to start somewhere. But we were able to do that and finding jobs for people. In addition to that, each Wednesday I challenge you to come down on a Wednesday morning when we have a class of about 30 to 40 people where we encourage them to develop skills that make them more marketable and so forth. Those are some of the efficiencies that we talked about. You talked about, as you well know, township government has been on the attack by the state Chamber of Commerce as they relate to the Shepherd report, Kernan and Shepherd report and so forth. And we would like to say to you that there is some discrepancies throughout the state, but I would say to you there's some sheriffs, there's some mayors, there's some councilmen that make some mistakes, but do you eliminate all the sheriffs? The answer is no. Likewise, you should not do that for township government, and that is not the case in Allen County. There in Allen County, there's 20, I talk about 20 townships, so forth, and we are operating in a better manner than what you see otherwise, and I'm really proud of that. And we look at efficiencies, there's always room for improvement, and each day we look to see what we can do better. I think that's the American way. Since our forefathers in the early 1700s, they had an operation. They knew that change was good, but they put in operation the procedures that make change not so easy to come about, that you had to really consider, and if it were possible that the procedure was intact for you, but you just don't change it overnight. But every politician, including yours truly, should be trying to achieve better and better, and that's what we have done in township government. 4 years ago, you probably remember this St. Liver story and so forth. I thought it was just awful that that government would sponsor, would use government taxpayer dollars for people to live in roaches and rats infested places. People thought that the trustee might have been grandstanding, but if you had only been there, you would have seen the cameras, probably could have seen my heart broken to see that people had to be exposed to that. We thought that was a waste of tax dollars. We took immediate steps to change that. We looked at that program, and that program was not effective, neither was it efficient. And so we eliminated that program,